Yeah, I think.
Okay, everyone, are we ready to start?
Yes.
So I have a special treat that I brought here to share with you. You can look at it. You could memorize it. But you can't take it. Or make copies of it.
Can we buy one?
No, it's not for sale.
There's not any other place to buy it?
No place in the world.
What is it?
I'll tell you what it is. Okay, so this past week, my brother and I were in New York. We were doing trying to do some fundraising, and my dad has a safe that has all the unpublished manuscripts of his dad, of my grandfather, the great one. Yeah. Now there's like 35 unpublished manuscripts. Currently, we have about 12 or 13 published works. Then there's the unpublished works. And then there's the forbidden section. And that's where I went. Forbidden.
Well, of course you did.
Yes.
Why is it forbidden?
I'll tell you why it's forbidden.
Yes. Forbidden? That's what I want.
So I found this book. Okay. The book this is the cover of the book. I made a copy of the entire book. Every page. It was weird because it was bound with embossed with the title, but inside it was all handwritten. It was all the actual handwritten works.
Nice handwriting.
All in Hebrew.
Black handwriting.
Okay.
It's legible.
Now, the title is Ma'amar HaSechel, which means in English, the essay of the intellect. Sechel is the intellect. And you open up the first page, and this was written exactly 55 years ago, between Cheshvan and Teva. So 55 years ago, what would that be? 1957, that would be.
Wow, I was born then.
And,
So you're
I'm 55.
and why is it forbidden? It's forbidden because if you look at the top left corner of the opening page, he writes 3 words. Eino ra'ui letfus. Do not publish.
Wow.
And you open it up, and there's 2 sections of the book, and he talks all about the intellect from like a very from ancient Jewish philosophical wisdom standpoint, and it is fascinating. I started reading it, and it's fascinating. And my brother tells me, "Oh, could you teach at Bris Shalom on machshava, on thought or intellect?" I'm like, heck yes.
And look, I have new material.
No, I only started it recently. I only got it last week. I went to Staples and made copies of each page.
The fact that you have copied it, published.
No, I didn't publish it.
and
Well,
copied
funny.
it for you.
It's funny because it came out pretty well, like in the copy machine.
Yes.
But these 3 words are a little blurred.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that. I'm saying I can't read what it says there.
Exactly.
So
Was
no
it dark
longer
in the copy?
says do not
Was
publish.
it dark in the copy?
In the original, yes, you can read it in the intro. That's how we know what it says.
So maybe he made it come out light so it no longer says do not publish.
I don't sit there. I can't read what it says.
Conveniently.
Yeah.
You're
Huh? I actually I made copies of 2 other books, 2 other from the forbidden section. One of them is like a broad treatise on prophecy, like an introduction and from a treatise from every different angle on prophecy. And the next one, which I just started, which is fascinating, is a kuntris, which is like a pamphlet or like a group of essays on tzniut. Tzniut is a hard word. Modesty is not the right translation for it. It means living an internal life, like building your internal world that he talks about there. Fascinating stuff. He talks about there's an external world and there's an internal world. And the internal world is something that you don't share with anyone. It's you and only you have access to that world. You don't share with anyone else.
Privacy?
And it's a spiritual world that you have within yourself. It says we're so used to like taking everything that we have and like broadcasting it to the world. But he describes there the esoteric idea of modesty, but not modesty like in dress or in language or in external things, but modesty in like in the intellectual realm. Very fascinating. Of that I made only one copy because I saw, as I was copying, I'm like, oh gosh, this is forbidden. I'm making one copy for myself.
What made you decide
What about
to do
your
it
brother?
now?
Yeah.
Well, because I wasn't.
And are you worried
No,
about his
he
rep?
wants it. He could borrow it from me, or if I let him. I just thought it was a little bit sensitive material, so I said I'm making one copy, and that's it. You want it? Go find the safe. Open the safe. Get the original yourself. Make copies yourself.
Had you ever seen this
When-
before?
Well, truthful. I'll tell you the truth be told.
Yeah.
When
This
my
is a
grand
restart class.
when my grandfather was ill, he was 9 years old. He had cancer. He was really sick, and but he was still at home. And we had like a round robin, a rotation of different grandchildren would stay with him overnight because he if my grandmother would tend to him overnight, she wouldn't be able to sleep. So when I was there, I was there and he was sleeping. So it was over, and it was like 2 a.m, and I sat down with all the manuscripts. He had like this massive closet with all these, and I just went through it. I went through all the stuff. I had such an urge to like take some stuff.
The rest know you have this.
No, this is just a copy. It's not the original.
They know you have. Yeah, but where did you mean while you were at the vault? There was a copy machine nearby, and you copied
No,
it
no,
right
no,
there?
no. This is last week. This is last week. The other episode is 6-7 years ago, during the final half year of his life, and I was there, and I went through, and I don't know. A lot of stuff I think were siphoned away. I don't know who took what or where all the stuff are, but like.
So you took stuff out of the closet?
I didn't take anything out. I wanted to. Truth be told, I'm not going to deny it, but I didn't. But from what I remember, there was a lot more stuff than what I saw in my father's safe. So I'm trying to figure out where the rest of the stuff are. Maybe some people didn't overcome their urges and didn't have the self-control that I did.
Have you discussed that
Uh,
with your father?
it's a sensitive topic. It's a sensitive
Well, let's
topic.
call your brother right now. Get him on the phone.
I'll take what I could get.
What did you take?
See, a lot of people. There's a lot of different objectives that people have with this.
Objectives or objections?
Objectives.
Both.
Me, it's the information. I want everything published, or whatever can be published in the most beautiful, efficient, organized manner possible. I'm not making any money off it. So that's not part of my objectives. I don't care what the price points they sell it at and how they publish it and whatever. That's irrelevant to me. All I want is to have my free copy and to be able to, learn, study, and just to see what the Torah of my grandfather to have it disseminated to the world. That's it. So that's why I didn't. These things would be very, very, very valuable to a lot of people, like the originals. Anyhow, so that's what I wanted to show you. This is specifically because we're talking about the intellect. We're talking about, from what I understand, my brother started talking about that last week, and he told me to continue it. I don't know what he said, but I don't.
But the book on Sneud.
Huh?
The book on Sneud.
Yes.
When did you copy it, and how did you?
I made a copy of it this past Wednesday in Staples in Nanuet, New York.
So the thing you copied it from, where is it?
I put it back in the safe.
So did you let the family know you were doing
Oh, well, my
this,
father
or-
gave me the key to the safe, so
Okay. So it was
I told him I'm making
sort
copies,
of with
so-
his blessing to...
yeah. But this, I already have someone I'm going to learn this with.
So wait a minute.
So there's nothing wrong with sharing.
Yeah, it says do not publish. It doesn't say don't
Okay,
learn.
so,
And if he didn't want anyone to read it, he would have just gotten rid of it.
right, so sharing the information is acceptable, but not publishing it
Publishing means-
because he doesn't want...
Making it
he
public.
didn't want-
Mass distribution of sensitive esoteric material was.
So you took it off the premises in order to go to Staples, and then you back. Oh.
Yeah.
So
Anyhow,
last week we just was wisdom.
Was wisdom.
was wisdom. Wisdom or thought? Was it wisdom or thought?
I have this cartoon for you.
Kind of a
Oh,
combination.
a cartoon for me? What are those minutes doing? Clever.
And then cloud.
Can I see?
Okay, so I don't know what my brother said. I'm going to say what I said, and I'm trying to make it as practical, as relevant, as useful as possible. Now, it's going to be difficult because, as we know, the thought or the ability to think or the power of intellect, call it what you want, is the most sublime of all abilities that we have. What differentiates us from animals, primarily, is the fact that we have intellect. And you'll ask me, Rabbi, someone once told me that the difference between humans and animals is that we have free will, not that we have intellect. So the answer is, we're both right. The reason why we have free will, the reason or the nexus of the challenges that we have in our lives is due to the fact that we have intellect. Let me spell this out for you. Every time that we have a challenge, a conflict, a free will choice, an ability to choose one way or the other, it's always a result of a conflict between intellect and emotion. Better said, it's a conflict between long-term goals and short-term goals. Let me say what that means. So you're on a diet. You want to lose weight, right? You want to be fit, but you also want ice cream and chocolate bars. So first of all, we have to understand what that means. Well, what do you want? Do you want this or do you want that? How is it possible to want two things which seem to be in conflict with each other? Is that a fair question? If I want to lose weight, but I want to eat ice cream, what does that mean?
You have to choose.
No, but what do I want?
Well, you could want both.
One is a short-term
No, but
pleasure.
they're in conflict. They're in conflict.
One is an immediate short-term pleasure, and the other is a goal, I guess.
You can still want both, regardless.
You know, you could
There's
still
a
want
conflict
both.
or not,
You could still
you
want
want
both.
Okay, but I think what the consensus is that you want both, or you can want both, and that's fine, and they're not in conflict, or they are in conflict. What are we saying?
It's choices, it's decisions.
Okay, but what do I want?
But you could want both.
I'm
And,
right.
if your long-term goal is to lose weight,
So then you're sabotaging. Then you're
well,
sabotaging
maybe you're not.
that.
Maybe you have to work out. Maybe you have to work your diet so you could have it.
So you're saying is to try to have a balance.
Yeah.
Try to have a balance. But I'm trying to go to the structural. What makes me want this and what makes me want that if they're in conflict? How can I want two things which don't seem to go well together? Before the balancing act, before we come around and say, okay, I have a solution. You could have this and have that, and they're not in conflict. But when they're in conflict, right? How is it possible to want two things which are opposites?
Okay, so you're saying like
What part of you want
the diet
switch?
would be intellectual because you know it's healthy, but the ice cream's emotional.
Exactly. It seems that when we want things, they're not necessarily from the same place. You could want something from, let's say, an intellectual standpoint, and you could want something from an emotional standpoint. Your soul could want something, and your body could want something. Your soul could want meaning, which may mean spending a Sunday afternoon with the Salvation Army, ringing the Salvation Army bell. But your body may want to watch football, right? So you'll have two things that you want to do, but they can't possibly both coexist because they're in conflict. So we have intellectual versus emotional. We have body versus soul. We have long-term versus short-term goals. This is what we describe as being free will. Being governed by two opposing forces. I'll give another example to this. We have something called instinct, and we have the ability to go beyond, against, on top of the instinct. Means we could want, like in our example, you're on a diet. Intellectually, long-term goal, you want to be fit, you want to be healthy, whatever, right? You want to lose weight. So therefore, you see the chocolate bar, you want the chocolate bar. Instinctually, your body's telling you, give me the chocolate bar. Your intellect or your long-term goals enable you to overcome, to supersede, to say no to your instincts. I mean, this is a uniquely human phenomenon. When we have instincts and we're able to control them, we're able to limit them, we're able to mitigate them, we're able to deny them. That's a uniquely human phenomenon. This is part of the same idea. And I'll say this in the flip, in the reverse of this, so the inverse or the converse, whatever. Someone tell me what it is. Some kind of verse. One of the most basic human instincts is that of survival. Humans will do almost anything to survive. See, when God forbid, people are put into situations where their life is endangered, they'll do unbelievable things to survive. We know the flight versus fight. Familiar with that idea? How instinctually we're able to mobilize or direct all our energy when we come to a point where our survival is at risk. We've all seen those YouTube clips, or maybe we haven't, but some of us have, where you see like the mom picking up like the car because like her baby's there, right? Where does she get that ability from? Because instinctually we're wired that if there comes a point of we need to survive or our children need to survive, we'll do crazy things. We're able to take all the energy from the rest of our body and just focus it all on whatever task it is that we need to survive.
Plus adrenaline. Plus adrenaline.
But where's the adrenaline from? That's all wired instinctually. We're all wired to do that instinctually. Now, important point here. Animals are no different. Instinctually, animals are no different. They're also wired to survive. They're wired to to protect their young, protect their kin. Right? They're exactly like us. We're exactly like them, more precisely, when it comes to survival or instinctual survival. The way that we're different is that we as humans can indeed choose to not want to survive. We can jump off bridges. We can commit horrible crimes and then shoot ourselves. We can do it, right? The human being, on one hand, is able to overcome their instinct for a good way, for a good purpose. To lose weight, for example. We have control. We have the idea of self-control. Conversely, inversely, versely, we're able to overcome our instinct in a bad way as well. Our instinct tells us to survive. We're able, through our decision-making ability, to go against that and kill ourselves. Once again, a uniquely human phenomenon.
That sounds irrational.
That sounds irrational?
Yeah.
That what?
Well, I think if the survival instinct is strong, and let's say, we learn how to survive, and it comes across, then when you're saying that somebody goes against that and does it, as an example would be that shooter, I think is a perfect example.
But people commit suicide every single day.
But when you analyze the motivation for it, a lot of people would come to the conclusion that it was an irrational decision.
Only by your system. Only by
Yeah,
your system.
I would. Yeah. Likewise, in terms of getting into the concept of free will, I think because of certain contingencies, not everybody has equal access to making free will. As an example, if you've been traumatized, and then they keep on using this all the time in these these recent shootings, that's going to have an effect on some other decisions you might make or how you might experience that negative kinds of instinctive behavior. So, even without that as an analogy, I have difficulty with the concept of total free will. I think in a good environment, in a healthy environment, when you're given two choices and you could think it through and there's not a gun to your head or a lot of other garbage that's into your head, I think the concept is fine. But when it gets,
I think what you're describing is what's called as the point of free will. I'm familiar with that idea. That there's like a sliding scale of free will. And what you're describing is like some people, if you grew up in a crime-riddled environment, your free will is to like just snatch the purse and don't kill the person, right? That's your point of free will. Where that's where the good and evil meet in your life. It means there's no, you don't have the free will to, well, should I spend the afternoon with the Salvation Army people or watching? That's not that you're because you're socially or conditionally or circumstances, you're wired to be evil. So don't be more evil than necessary. But if you grew up in, let's say, a different kind of family, that wouldn't be your point of free will.
But Rabbi, I hear what you're saying about different points of where you decide between good and evil. But there's another thing that I hear her describing, which is a person who has post-traumatic stress syndrome may feel his survival is threatened by things that nobody else would even dream of thinking was a survival question. That if somebody gets angry at you, you feel
Okay,
as
so
if your
let's.
survival is
I always try to
and
limit.
the
Let's
instinct
try to
kicks in
limit.
instantly.
Let's
all
try.
the
Let's
time.
try to limit the conversation to normal, healthy people. And we know that normal, healthy people have done
Wherever
things.
they are. Wherever they are.
that's not
Wherever
me.
they are.
So you're saying this?
I'm saying
this is
people that aren't-
on a slide- there are people on a
Normal off the
continuum?
table.
Oh, with regards to that previous point,
Yeah,
the point is not.
because I might be here, but she might be here.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
continuum of react-
It means
reactivity?
where the point of, where the point. This is the previous point. There's some things that you for sure won't do. Like to you, like you're really gonna go. Are you really going to go into a hospital and start, I don't know, slicing the throat of babies born in Sharia Tzedek? You won't do that, right?
Don't even
That's way too evil, and you're not even considering it. Are you going to go to Africa and spend the rest of your life tending to kids with malaria? Probably not. That's not really your point of challenge. Your point of challenge is the point where you have a difficulty. You have a struggle between what do I do? Do I do this or do I do that? Is your point of free will? It's where it's at the point where the evil or the bad or the negative decisions are within reason. You may do that, and the good is also within reason.
So a person who has a terminal illness and they're still rational,
Okay.
and they decide that they're going to take their life before they put their family through the pain and misery and pay for doctors' fourth houses and 15th Mercedes. So they decide that.
So you're talking about euthanasia.
Right.
No, I'm talking about a person. Yeah, but I wasn't even thinking about people helping. I'm talking about just a person.
Yeah.
Taking care of it themselves.
Taking care of it themselves.
Altruistic.
So that, well, it is for some people.
Right.
They think that.
Absolutely.
So that would be the point of free will in making that decision.
Oh gosh.
what?
I had cousins, aged cousins. They were in their 90s, and they were both getting old and didn't want to be a burden to the kids. And they wrote this incredible 3-page letter to their children, very sensitive, caring, unbelievable, and they took care. They both killed themselves.
It's funny because
But
actually,
also-
with regards to your question, has a lot more to do with the halachic implications. That's much more of an important point than means. If you know you're going to die and you're just suffering, or if you know that your parent or your relative is going to die for sure, and its question is, will they die now or will they die with 3 or 4 days or 3 or 4 weeks of pain and suffering? So you may have the obligation to let them die. What I mean by that is you can't kill someone. Even if you kill someone who's about to die, like the Talmud says, if you close the eyes of someone who's dying, means you're a murderer. That's it. You're a murderer because you separate someone's soul and body. You did the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, to kill the person. But your example, the way like kosher euthanasia, and don't quote me on this, but kosher euthanasia is when someone is terminally ill, someone's needless suffering, needless pain, right? We want obviously to minimize the suffering, but we can't kill someone. So there's creative solutions how to do that when.
And
Well,
that's
no,
acceptable,
that's not
and
that.
that is acceptable.
Which may be acceptable. I'm not going to say
Which means
acceptable.
what? Withhold
Which means like this. Let's say withholding treatment.
Additional morphine.
Means
Or additional-
no. Additional more that might kill someone. We can't do actions that will kill someone.
Not active treatment.
But if
But-
one
but-
does
but
it
what we can't
themselves,
do-
but her point is
But my
they do
point
it
is not
themselves.
about somebody doing this.
There's
It's
no
about-
difference. You
Yes,
you
there
have
is,
no.
because it's about the perk.
Say from a halachic standpoint, there's no difference
halachic
because
point, okay.
because you have no right to kill yourself.
Okay.
Like clearly and across all classical Jewish sources, it says suicide is murder, just like murder is murder. It's the same thing. You have no right. You can't say, "Oh, it's my life. I'm allowed to do whatever I want with it." That's not. That's
It's
not.
Hashem's life.
Yeah. So long as Hashem's saying you're living, you have no right to say, "Oh, I'm gonna."
What if you refuse to eat?
No. So the way they used to do it, for example, in hospitals, you have someone who's terminally ill that has an oxygen tank. Now it's all through the wall, like there's no tanks anymore. But it used to be they would give oxygen tanks. The oxygen is done. You have to replace it with a new tank. Now you can't take an oxygen tank. Well, you can't take it. You can't take an oxygen tank and pull it out of the patient. But if the oxygen tank is depleted, maybe you won't have to replace it with a new one, and let them die that way.
Who's the you?
You, as in the practitioner or the, means that's passive
They don't get in there
euthanasia.
fast enough, or-
That's passive euthanasia. I don't know how did we spin off talking about euthanasia? See that?
I asked,
We're
well,
talking about
free
irrational
will.
decisions.
I was
Irrational
talking about the
decisions, yeah.
point of free will.
Yeah,
So I'm
I know. I
talking-
just like saying, wow, we're talking about thought, intellect, euthanasia,
Right.
passive versus active. Anyhow, but you. So you're saying that someone choosing to. Your point is that someone choosing to go against their survival instinct may indeed be a rational choice. Agreed.
See, I guess I think that when you're talking about the kid or the person who grew up in a crime environment,
Yeah.
and that person decides to steal rather than to murder,
Yeah.
or to steal and not steal and murder. Okay. So then that made me think about that the point of free will is culturally decided
It's
or
influence.
Because if you think, so then I thought about that, and then I was thinking about Eskimos. So Eskimos, when someone is old and they're no longer functional, then it is the custom. They have a ceremony with the person. They put the person on an ice floe. The person just dies from freezing to death. It's not painful. It's slow, and
It's not painful. It's slow. That sounds like very
You go to
painful.
sleep. You
just go to sleep.
You go to sleep.
You
and
go to
then-
sleep. You go to shock. You go to sleep. It's over. Okay, but it is acceptable to the community. It's part of their religious belief. It's part of what they have to do because their society cannot tolerate having people who cannot function. They can't travel. They can't produce work for whatever it is for the community. So it's part of their culture. And I think that the point where we come to a point of free will, like the person you're talking about, the shooter, well, that shooter had a rationale for why he was shooting all those people. It may not be what we think is acceptable by our terms, but in his terms, it
So
makes
that's what I'm
sense.
saying. Intellectually, he was convinced
Yeah.
that it made sense, it's rational, it's acceptable for him to take his own life, even though that's against his instinctual orientation.
Well,
I would say.
you could say a couple of things.
A dog will sit at the grave of its master forever until it dies, and that sounds counterinstinctual.
What? But remember, if all dogs do that, that's the instinct. That's the point.
But you said animals can't go against.
Well, you have the scorpion, for example. Scorpions surrounded by fire will kill themselves. But all scorpions surrounded by fire will all kill themselves because that's their instinct. That's the point. The point is not,
Well, it's a choice.
dogs
It's a
dogs
choice.
kill themselves. The point
It's a
is
choice
that
of to die
instinctually
more
they all do the
easily
same thing.
than
See, I
okay.
think
But all humans, they all do different things because we have not just. It means if we were just instinctual, we would all do the same things. right? You know, so if you say dogs go to their master's grave, then
Some, not
oh,
all.
you're saying some.
Yeah, so those ones that do are countering, going against instincts.
Yeah.
See, you could say to some extent free will is a luxury. I mean, from the way we're describing it now, because, or you could say that child in the ghetto who has a propensity for crime and doesn't do it is actually exhibiting better traits.
Like
That's
that
what we
kid
said.
in
That was that
You know,
point that we.
you know, I mean, you could look at it. It's a very fluid kind of concept. I have trouble putting, a claw on it and saying it looks like it's this and characterizes human behavior. I think the thing about the shooter that is causing so much turmoil intellectually is that we are really forget about the gun laws and all that, but what makes an individual? And the mental health community is not saying it is a mental health issue per se. Look at the data. We're not saying, is this instinctual? Is it a rage response? Was there rationality here? It's really causing a lot of people to look at human behavior and try to come up with some understanding of what causes what I think what you're saying, what we would consider aberrant behavior under this time, this circumstance, and in our society. And I think our discussion here is touching on a lot of that. In terms of the bottom line is what makes us a moral Jewish human being? What are those characteristics? How do we promote it? How do we recognize it? How do we encourage it? Is it? And to me, it's a very, very complex.
Well, my specific point, we talked about a lot of different things, but I think the one takeaway point that I wanted with this idea was that humans are influenced by more than just instinct. That's the takeaway point. That I think everyone agrees. So call it what you want. Is the intellect, all humans. There's different levels of intellect, but it means that we're not just instinct. We have the ability to do above the instinct. We can control the instinct. We could go against the instinct. We're dominated by more than just instinct.
I think, like Denise said as well, I think the environment and the culture.
Yeah.
You go to different cultures and it'll be different. Right.
Yeah. Yes. Agreed.
Well, and just building on all of that, even your example of the scorpion, which lower order creature, but if you take the current brain research again, like what we've been talking about, a lot of our behaviors and responses and the way we're perceiving and interpreting our world is a mix of genetics, and I would say the scorpion, there's an inbred, trait in there that get out of
How
it.
does the scorpion manage to kill itself?
But anyway, whether a lower order or a higher order thinking person has other responses to stuff that are built in, and then you've got the environmental that Max is talking about, and all of that is shaping our perception. So free will within what framework is a very big question within it.
Right.
That's well said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to say one final point is that ironically, humans are physically the least gifted of all animals. Like, proportionate to our size, we're the least gifted physically.
No fangs, no claws.
No, nothing. Right? We have no.
We have guns.
Well, we have guns, but that's a result of our intellectual prowess. I'm saying the reason why we rule the world is because we invented things like airplanes and firearms.
Yeah.
We invented those kind of things, because of our intellect. But it's ironic that the most advanced, gifted, able animal, humans, are physically the least gifted. Physically the least gifted. And also the only ones that have verbal communication. Yes, so...
Well, that's not really true. Because, not in terms of, but it's not really true.
Well, it is...
There's groups of animals that do have communication. You have languages, like elephants and wolves, they have language. They can communicate by sound and by by not just sound, but by movement.
Actually,
and-
there's a story in the Talmud about this guy who knew how to talk to birds.
Mm-hmm.
Strange. He knew how to communicate with birds. But I think what I mean is that I think what I meant to say with verbal communication is that we could,
Speech.
I think it's more organized verbal communication. We could, if we were birds, we'd figure out a way to talk to humans. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think it's a legitimate question to bring back to your topic, I think it's a legitimate question to give interpretation to exactly what free will means.
Yes.
And what the determinants really are, and within what framework the person is morally obligated for certain decisions that they make. And able to act on them. And I mean, there's all the court cases, but I think morally that's the issue. And I think you've raised an important issue looking at, the options available. And what I'm hearing is all the questioning is, but what does free will mean, and to what extent are people bound by their perceptions of what free will and their options are?
So the reason why I brought in free will, just to clarify, was because free will demonstrates the importance of honing, of using, of exercising our intellect, because this demonstrates how big of a part intellect, or the intellectual realm, or all the realms besides for the physical and the instinctual, how big of a part they play in our lives. So you could say to me, Rabbi, why is it important to learn about the intellect? What's the importance of it? I'll say, the reason why it's important, because as demonstrated by the discussion about free will, intellect plays a very important part in our lives, or the intellectual realms do play a more. That's why I brought it up.
Helping us make decisions as to what we want to do.
Everything. That's part of who we are. We're composed of physiologically.
Responsibility. So the distinction is that the animal kingdom doesn't take responsibility for their actions. Their actions come out of thought.
But that's a result of their free
Free
will.
will.
Because they're just instinctual.
So that's one of the differences, or that's the outcome. Is humans have the opportunity to take responsibility for whatever happens in their life. Animals don't.
Right. But I don't want to ignore that question, because once we brought it up, free will, I think it's important to address it. So I think the most important point is that we do indeed take into account everything. Everything, all the circumstances, everything is determined, and that all brings to a certain point of where a person's holding in this, in the scale of life, so to speak, and where their decision points of good and evil, the moral choices, where does that lie? We're talking about free will. We're not talking about chocolate or vanilla. Hey, I don't know. Let me choose. What do I want? That's not a moral choice. That's not a choice we have to say. Well, what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's evil. Free will is the point in life where, or the point in time, or in ideas where the good and the bad mix, and you could go either way, and you as an individual have to choose from all the opposing forces or influences. What are you going to do?
Including paying a price in your culture or society. Mm-hmm. As an example, not all, if you look at tribal cultures, the concept of free will is not within the individual, it's within the group and the group leader. So you're, in general, and
yeah, but let's say someone deviates from the group, they get punished. Well, why? Because they chose to deviate, and we recognize that we all recognize the idea of punishment, of reward and punishment. All humans understand that. Why? Because we understand that instinctually or intuitively, we understand that there's something that when you do bad, you chose to do bad, therefore you deserve punishment.
And if you live
Means
in a law,
we understand. If someone does a crime, they should be punished. They should go to prison. They should be fined. They should be shot at. Right? We all understand those ideas, so we can argue about how severity. But everyone agrees that crime is deserving of punishment, because we understand that crime didn't have to be crime, and there was a choice to do crime. And you had the ability to choose not to do crime. You chose to do crime, and therefore you'll be punished. No one says, oh, this person did this crime, but they were just so compelled to do it. Because we understand that we have choices, and if you make a choice, you have to live with the consequences,
But
like Al
most of
talked
us refrain from stealing, not because we think we're going to get caught and go to jail, but because we've been taught that it's wrong
Okay.
and we don't want to be
So,
bad
so,
people.
so, okay, but let's say you do get
Right.
caught. If someone does get caught stealing, so they have to pay the price. Specifically because they had the ability to choose not to do so. So you'll say, well, Rabbi, what about kleptomaniacs? People that compulsively...
It's more
compulsive.
instinctive.
Well, so our society...
It's an illness.
Our society is not. So I don't know exactly. I'm not a mental health professional, so I don't really know what a kleptomaniac feels, and
Well, it's a
But-
compulsion, they're out of control, but they're still held responsible for the
they're
crime.
still right. Exactly. Our
Because they're
society,
human, they're responsible.
Right.
our society
They
does
can't
not
control it.
distinguish
They're still responsible.
between
Right.
where a person is coming from. We just look at the result.
But there's four kinds of people. Those who say what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, and so on. And one of them is, the fourth kind of person is, what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. And there might be people who really believe that, and
Loonies.
so they just take whatever they want because they don't understand the whole concept of ownership.
Yeah, but again, humans are accountable and responsible for their actions and their thoughts to themselves. That's the distinction
And
to me
society.
between a human and an animal.
Yeah.
It's all about, I don't mean blame or guilt when I say responsibility. I mean they create whatever happens in their life. And an animal,
But it's very hard
and they
for
have
us-
choice there.
It's very hard for us as a society to determine where exactly that person's from. I mean, it's quite possible that physiologically a kleptomaniac is unable to contain himself from stealing. It's possible.
Yeah.
But as a society, we just make a blanket rule. You steal, you get punished. That's what we do.
As humans.
as a society.
As a society.
But I'm saying,
Get a good lawyer.
I was going to go lawyer.
He can get you off of any.
let me-
I know someone who used to stay by my parents' house. He was like a poor orphan from Israel, and he ended up somehow by my parents' house. And he was a kleptomaniac, and he stole from the pushki, and he stole from J.C. Penney, and he stole and keeps on stealing. Now he's in prison. He's getting out in like 25 days from his latest round.
Adventure.
And he says, if I see someone else's stains, if I see Al's phone, I just cannot stop myself from taking it. Just
You pay
can't
the
do it.
bill, keeping it.
Well, let me
He claims that he's unable to refrain from stealing, but he's in prison because our society says if you steal, you go to prison
It's not an
or you
excuse,
get punishment.
it's an explanation. Just like the
But is there a
woman
treatment
who
for
was
it?
abused and then kills her husband. Murder is wrong, you can't kill your husband, but it's an explanation for, well, she reached a point in her emotional state where she was no longer able to make the choices you and I make every day.
But society
But
can't
she
make that
was-
distinction.
Well, let me-
So I'm saying,
Yeah.
the way
Now, they've made new laws because the society has decided it's so prevalent, the distinction is important. So it's important in some places, not in others.
Yeah,
And
but
when it comes
I'm
to
saying, but
abuse,
any outsider, I cannot really know what someone else is going through. Only God knows. So therefore, the way we treat people and the way God or a person should treat himself is different because we can't possibly know what really we're really on the sliding scale of free will. Were they holding? Did they really have a choice? I mean, that person who grew up in the ghetto, like we said, they cannot say I'm living a crime-free life. They can say it, maybe, right?
Okay,
But they could choose what kind of crime where on the crime scale to do. So their free will choice may be to steal, and that may be a mitzvah for them.
To get this a little off center and give another perspective, we're being individually centered in terms of the individual who commits I'll just call it antisocial act, whatever it is, and the other players, and as individuals where we have a chance to express our free will, I'm thinking of like court cases where a juror is on a jury and is morally confronted with the behavior of this person, which might have a lot of different factors that affect it, and they in turn have the responsibility to make a judgment on what the punishment or the treatment of that person would be. So that's another dimension of humans looking at taking their free will, and the free will in this case of the juror, to appraise and to evaluate someone else's behavior and decide if it's within what they consider acceptable limits. So I mean, it's not all just there's a collective. It ultimately ends up a collective voice of people making those decisions as well.
But jury and court-wise, it has to be according to the law. According to the law.
Blurry.
It's very blurry.
No,
Totally
Well, and then the
blurry.
laws
no,
get
no,
changed.
no. Yes, but
And
you
they
have to
use-
make a decision according to the law, not what you think, not what you feel, not what you think the punishment. It has to be a court, supposed to be.
There are rules.
But some of them don't even know anything about law. That's the ironic thing.
No,
but
but
We have the jury who's totally ignorant.
Law,
When
they can
I-
use a lot of contingencies that they can bring into
The
it.
assess the
You're welcome.
person
So it's not-
who
it's
decides
not-
if
Thanks,
they're
baby.
Have a good week.
Capable
Yeah.
of making
Yeah.
a decision.
Yeah, the insane, I
You
mean,
know, all
Okay,
of
so
this.
I was on,
And then there's the
I was on
question
the,
of, is it okay to commit a person against his will? You're taking away his free will. He doesn't want to be committed into a mental institution, but maybe they would be able to help him to get over
and
whatever
at one
it
point
is.
in time, we did commit, and now we don't. I mean, so you know, there, laws do change, and you know, whatever.
Based
I
on
mean,
societal norms and what
Right.
we accept and what we don't accept.
But that's,
well, we
but
we
they,
create
but they
those
say
laws,
now that that's why
absolutely.
there's so many people out there shooting at random because they ought to have been committed and they not because you don't want to take away a
It's part
person's
of
free
it.
will, and so the criminal
of it, yeah,
justice system
sure.
comes
It's
in
part of
instead.
it.
Part of it.
It's part of it. But what is important, I think, is that free will is determined by the culture that you live in. Because if you lived in a culture, like if you lived in an Aborigine culture of some sort, where property values are so different than our property values.
Maybe they don't have ownership.
Well, they don't have ownership. They have collective ownership. So you would take after another tribe who came to steal your group's belongings, and that would be morally wrong for them to do that. So you'd have to protect yourself. But you individually may not own anything. You are just part of
So
the
there's no
collective.
such thing as stealing from one another within
No,
the
only
tribe.
from trees, stealing from another group, another tribe. So I think that's one of the.
So the ones that I said earlier, there's no such thing as personal ownership. There's no such concept.
in some cultures.
What is the
Different
Jewish
in ours,
concept
yeah.
of free will?
Yeah.
No, I think that the critical idea with free will is what we said, is that is a choice of good and evil that everyone has, wherever it may be very different for someone else. So, for me to snatch someone's purse may indeed be or is indeed a negative thing to do, but someone else it could be a positive thing to do. So it's very much an individual. It's very much dependent on where the individual is holding. But I think, getting back to the topic at hand, that the intellectually, through our intellectual, our cognitive and analytical abilities, we can change, we can affect, we can reframe ourselves in tremendous ways. I take the example of free will. I think that one of the ways that we could be successful in our free will activities, or maybe even the only way we can, is if we understand intellectually that doing something wrong, doing something evil is bad, and I want to do good, and that's beneficial, and then I'm going to get dividends for that, and that's the right thing to do.
That's what Mozart's all about.
Well, ironically, I'll disagree with you, because I think specifically the intellectual realm is only the starting point. This is really the idea I wanted to share with you, that Musar is about the intellectual aspects of it as well, but that's only the starting point, because there's a very big schism between the intellectual and the practice and the practical level.
What's the head and the heart?
It's the head and the heart, exactly. And there's a great great piece of midrash that a lot of people don't know. Maybe some people do know. But this guy, Esav, or Esau, how you pronounce it, Jacob's twin brother.
Yeah.
Anyone knows perchance where he's buried?
And in the cave of Machpelah? In Hebron?
That's your guess?
That's my guess.
That's your guess. Okay, anyone has any other guesses? So the midrash says like this, okay? And it's very pertinent because it's this week's parsha. It's this week's Parshas Vayechi.
His head is in there.
Very good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
His head is.
His head is there. What it says is like this. What it says in the midrash is as follows. Jacob dies in this week's parsha. Joseph convinced Pharaoh to let him go to Israel. They bring him to Israel. They bring the dead body to Israel. They're about to bury him in the Marat HaMachpelah in Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac are buried. And Esau shows up. And he says, no, it's my spot. There's one spot left. It's mine. And there's a whole fight, whatever, back and forth. And this guy Hushim, the only son of Dan, one of the sons of Jacob was Dan, and his son was Hushim, and he was deaf, and he didn't know what was going on. So he asked someone, "What's going on?" Right? And he says, Esav is preventing Jacob from being interred here because he says it's his. So Hushim takes a stick and goes and decapitates Esav. That's what it says in the Medrash. And his head rolls into the Maras HaMachpelah and was buried there. His head.
Where's the rest of it?
Huh?
Where's the
I
rest
don't
of
know. Good question.
Because his
That's what it
intellect-
says.
His intellect was good.
Intellectually, well, this is the idea philosophically. Intellectually, Esav was equal to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Intellectually, he was all there. But the difference, we know that Esav is a Rasha. He's a wicked person. Why? Because he didn't take the intellectual ideas and transplant them to practice to the head and heart, right? Head and heart. That's philosophically the idea behind that medrash. So yes, Musar is about the intellectual, but that's the starting point. We have to infuse the intellectual into the practice, into the physical.
So instead of giving $100, we should give $1 100 times. So
Oh,
that we
maybe
get in the
one way to
habit
do
of
it. But I think
giving.
an example of this is we know that the Rambam Maimonides wrote 3 major works. Correct?
Guide to the Complex.
Very good.
Mishnah Torah,
Mishnah Torah
and the list of all the mitzvahs.
no Pirush Mishnayos.
Oh.
Pirush Mishnayos. The Rambam Maimonides wrote 3 massive works. One of them is a Pirush commentary in the Mishnah, Guide to Perplexed, which is the philosophy, and Mishnah Torah, Yad HaChazaka, which is all of the oral Torah organized into 14 different books. And we know that the order or the sequence of the different ideas are in the order of what of need to know, like what you need to know first. So he starts off with what's the first thing he writes about? You got to believe in God. You want to be Jewish? You got to believe in God. Correct? But he does not use the word to believe in God, rather to know God. And the commentators say that the Rambam Maimonides says that in Judaism we don't talk about faith, we don't talk about belief, we talk about knowing, we talk about knowledge. And he there describes, based primarily on Greek philosophy, and he proves how in Greek philosophy how it makes sense intellectually that God exists.
Oh,
The idea is that-
Aristotle's proofs.
Huh?
Aristotle's proofs.
Yes, yes. But the idea is that we mistakenly talk about belief in God when really we're talking about knowledge of God. Got to know intellectually, prove it. Data. What can we know? What evidence is there? And not to say that there's no room for faith, but I think that these two things go together. But it has to be rooted, it has to be based upon the intellectual, and only that could you add the emotional. I think there are certain things in practical Judaism where you cannot experience it before you understand it. You can experience something before you understand it. It means everything has to be rooted, almost everything has to be rooted in the intellectual, understand it, and then experience, and then practice, and then partake in it, head to heart. First head, then heart.
Give an example of that, like what?
Well, there's one. I'll give the converse.
Okay.
There's one of them which is the opposite way. I think the mitzvah, the commandment of Shabbos, of refraining from work and doing, and right, that is something which is the opposite. It's true, where you can't understand it till you experience it. But generally, anyone. I give an example. I'll tell you. Put me on the spot here.
See, I think the opposite is generally true, more often than the other. For instance, going to your knowledge and your understanding of God. I mean, I think, I know I struggled as a teen with that, and until I experienced it, I couldn't understand it. I don't know if I'm backwards, but I think a lot of people have that similar experience. Intellectually, I was told about God, and all I could say was, really, it didn't make any sense to me. When I experienced God, then suddenly the understanding came.
The problem with this is you picked up, Lori, on the controversial opinion. I said a controversial opinion as a fact, and you said, "Wait a minute." I believe that, in my opinion, controversial opinion alert. I think that it has to start like that. It has to start intellectually. I think in order for it to be healthy and strong, it has to start with the intellectual and then morph into the into the emotional or the feelings. I think I'll explain why I say that. I think this is up for debate, but I think that if an idea, I don't know if it has to start. Let me say, not the timeline, but it can't be
emotional response until you have the knowledge to begin with.
Okay, it can't be
So that's the
emotional.
Then you experience, and then it comes back.
Okay, or maybe
Circle. You have to have some, I think, you have to have some knowledge, maybe not full understanding.
Right.
Certainly some knowledge, some foundation, some basis to have your experience,
Right.
interpret your experience, and then you come back.
Right.
And nurture and
so. I don't know
make
which
the
way.
foundation
So
grow, think.
I don't want.
Grow, yeah.
Let's see what we agree upon. I don't know if it has to start from the intellectual, but it's certainly emotion devoid of intellectual, foundation is not going to be successful. That I think we agree. We agree. I'm not even so sure if I agree with myself. So
Still up for debate.
still for debate. But I think that. Oh, thank you. But I think that it has to. If it's just, I feel like this is the right way to do it. I feel like God exists. So tomorrow you can feel like God doesn't exist, and you're totally untethered to any emotional investment in that idea. So if it's just emotional, devoid of any intellectual basis, it's very flimsy. It's not. It's probably not going to be. It's not going to withstand the test of time, because if you feel like this, tomorrow you can feel like that, and then. And then what happens to your feelings? Your feelings could change. But if something is understood on an intellectual basis, then I think it's much more likely it's built to last. Yes.
I was married for 17 years to a man who was convinced that there isn't any deity, or at the very best, you should be an agnostic. And he gave me books to read that proved this, and it demolished Aristotle's proofs, so that I knew that there's no proof. And so I tried very hard to be an agnostic to please my husband. But I couldn't do it, because I know that God is real.
Okay, so I feel like the class that we just taught, that doesn't really have a flow. So I want to just recap and show how really these ideas are all connected. And what I want to do is that I think that it's different. It means we don't have to come up with strategies of how to use the intellect. Like, how do we become more patient people? So we can say, well, maybe wait 5 minutes before you sit down to watch television. Wait 5 minutes and just relax and don't give in to your We could talk about these different practical strategies of how to acquire, how to gain
Like you make your bracha and then you wait a moment before you take the first bite.
There's different strategies. I think when it comes to intellect, when it comes to thought, it's more important to understand that this is a tool that you have to use. It means it's not the goal, it's a tool. And does that make sense? It's not like we're trying to have intellect. No, we have intellect. We have the ability to have intellect, and it's so important because we need to use it for so many different things. It means it's not the goal; it's the means. It's not the end; it's the way we get there. No, not the journey, because you're spiritualizing it again, Laurie. It's not the journey; it's a tool. This is something that we could use in so many different areas of our life. What I'm trying to impress upon everyone here how vital, how important, how crucial it is to not neglect this ability, because this ability is very crucial for us. Number one, we want to have spirituality. If it's just feelings, if it's just it just like emotions, then it's probably not going to be successful in the long term. It has to be rooted. Our spirituality has to be rooted in intellectually. So whether or not it has to be first, what has to be first, what has to be second, that's academic. What we need to know is that emotional spirituality alone probably won't last. Just like we said, if you just believe in God but you don't have any evidence, you can't prove it, then you're just engaged emotionally, not intellectually. It's the way for us or one of the ways that we could use in exercising our free will, not just in spiritual ways, but also, like, say, in very practical ways. Like, if you want to lose weight, so you have to recognize that there's different forces compelling you in every way, and intellectually you say, "Oh, I want to be fit," but your instincts or the other forces are telling you other things. So your job is the way you're going to be successful is if you heighten your intelligence in this area, which means if you remind yourself constantly intellectually why it's important to be fit, then what you're doing is you're strengthening that side of the equation. It'll be much easier for that side to be successful over let's have the instinctual of let's have chocolate, let's have ice cream, let's indulge. So another example of how the power of the intellect can be used to, like I said, not the ends, but the means to being successful in many, many different areas of our free will choices. Musa, we said, may start with the intellect, but obviously it's not the end goal. So the intellectual is a starting point of Musar, and it's very important to understand, a whole array of the wide array of different Musar pursuits that we have. They may start with the intellect, but it's not the end goal. It's the practice, it's the practical, it's the head and heart, like Laurie said, and it may be the starting point, but it's not the end. It's not the end goal. So that's that. We have Esav. We know that Torah, science, the ways to conceptualize God, like we talked about last time, which was like 3 months ago. So probably no one remembers, but I do. You remember?
Yeah.
When I talked about Torah and science?
Yeah.
That was from what I remember was a riveting monologue. But when I talked about Torah and yeah, when I talked about Torah and science, yes. So I just threw it. I'm like, probably no one remembers. So wait a minute.
I wasn't
Yeah,
here.
you weren't here.
I wasn't here.
But
Me too. We got 3 people here who missed it.
okay, so what I was talking about the highest, the ultimate pleasure, the highest level of pleasure that one could possibly have, which I call discovery, which I described by saying, this is the way Maimonides describes it in Sefer Mitzvot, Mitzvah Gimel, and he talks about the ultimate pleasure, which is the intellectual ecstasy of discovering God. And he says that God, we know, is infinite. You can't see God. How do you may feel it, but it's not as concrete as, how can we experience God? So he says that God and his wisdom is the same thing. And the second you experience God wisdom, you experience God. Boom. So how do we experience God wisdom? So he says that God implanted, so to speak, his wisdom into Torah and science, which these are absolute truths. And if you have an insight, if you have an insight in either one of these things, then when you experience a tremendous discovery in one of these two areas, what you just did is you were able to experience God. So what I said is like what I was trying to how it connects to our point is that the only way to do that is intellectually. The only way to do that is intellectually. So we want to have the ultimate pleasure. We're going to have to use our intellect to get us there.
Salvation, the halachic man.
Yes,
That's
yes,
the pleasure
yes,
he's talking about.
yes, yes. Maimonides in the Sefer Mitzvahs, when he delineates all the mitzvahs, the third mitzvah, loving God, that's how he describes it as the ultimate pleasure. And he describes exactly how to do it, so I'll just send you there. So that's that. Our intellect, our ability to think, cognitive, analytical skills that we're given, is our most potent tool in many different areas of our life's pursuits, in our pursuit of success in our free will choices, in our pursuit in success in our spirituality, in our pursuit in success of many different areas. Use it. How to use it, maybe for a different session after I finish this book, I'll tell you how to use it. Maybe.
If this is the only copy except the one in the vault, please make yourself another copy and lock it away somewhere so that if you
I actually have
forget
two
somewhere-
copies. I have two copies of it. I made.
Now the truth comes out.
Actually, I made 4 copies of it.
Now the truth.
I made